This is episode 1 of Invincible season 4. This episode will start from space, where Allen and Nolan brutally finished Viltrumite soldiers. Nolan will reveal the truth of the Empire to Allen. Only 50 pure-blooded Viltrumites remain in the universe, but it wasn't always this way. Today, Nolan recounts the true history of the Empire to Allen, much more than what people know. The weak Viltrumites, it's true, were a violent race that valued strength above all else. To rid themselves of weakness, they massacred each other until they became the Viltrumites known today. Over the years, their people united and turned their attention towards space, establishing the Viltrumite Empire, an empire that continued expanding at a surprising rate for almost 1,000 years, until their enemies created a weapon capable of harming them. They had created a virus unique to their genetic code. The virus was devastating. It spread among the Viltrumites at an alarming rate. It seemed there was no way to stop it. The entire empire was in danger. Attempts were made to quarantine those infected, but it was too late. Almost the entire population was infected with this virus they would come to know as the Scourge Virus. Those who survived the virus discovered how deadly its side effects were. There was a short period after the virus left their system where their strength and invulnerability were completely reduced, but they were the lucky ones. For decades, the virus eliminated Viltrumites. Each year, it claimed countless lives, either those who succumbed to the virus or those who were killed during the side effect that weakened them. In the end, they lost almost 99.9% of the population. They were on the brink of extinction. Miraculously, the Viltrumite Empire endured. Soon, reports would arrive that throughout the empire, expansion was slowing down. New plans began to be created, allowing a single Viltrumite to be sent to conquer a planet. Nolan's mission was part of this plan. Viltrumite dominion over the galaxy continued only based on the threat of the Empire's force. Reproduction with conquered races, something that had been forbidden for a long time, was now encouraged. This proceeded that way with mixed results, until they found Earth, until Mark was born. Nolan never revealed what the true motive was for conquering Earth, what made this planet so important. Human DNA is almost 100% compatible with Viltrumite DNA. The Empire's plan was to turn Earth into a breeding camp. The entire history of the Scourge Virus was hidden, but never forgotten. Planet Viltrum, now isolated from all alien races, stands as a tribute to fallen brothers, a reminder of what they have lost to continue the quest for interplanetary dominion. But now Nolan sees this quest as a senseless purpose. Allen doesn't like what the 1,000 Viltrumites want to do with Earth. He was born in a breeding camp and doesn't wish that on anyone. He thinks they should warn Mark, but Nolan doesn't agree. Allen needs to take Nolan to the coalition of planets. But no matter how much the alien trusts Nolan, he doesn't know if his boss will. This isn't going to be easy. However, this doesn't concern Nolan. If they really want to save Earth and protect the coalition, their leader must know everything Nolan knows. Also, they need all the information that was in the books. There's very valuable information encoded in words, and this information will make Allen's boss trust him. Sometime later, on the planet Telescria, Allen's wife was asking where he had been. The alien was trying to explain he was on a mission, that he was imprisoned for months and just managed to escape. He wanted to talk to Telia, but didn't have the opportunity. However, it seems Allen has misunderstood his wife. What she was asking him was why he was sleeping on the couch, why Allen hadn't gone to find her in her chambers. The alien tries to explain the situation, and before he can say anything, Telia is on top of him. In this home, there's a rule. No matter how late Allen arrives, he always has to wake Telia, since she spent the last few months without him and is hungry and wants her husband. Allen tries to stop him and explain that right now they can't do that, but Telia is tired of so much pretension. She wants to do it and doesn't care about anything else. But soon, the woman realizes there's someone else in the house. To her disgust, it's a Viltrumite, so she grabs a weapon that was hidden in the couch and shoots Nolan. However, this weapon doesn't do any damage. Nolan regrets having scared the woman. Nolan apologizes to the woman for having frightened her and promises he's not here to hurt her. Allen vouches for this. Nolan is your friend. Sometime later, at the central base of the coalition, some individuals are analyzing all the information contained in Nolan's books. They find it fascinating the way Nolan encrypted this information. While they converse, one of them starts to say he doesn't completely trust Allen, but the thinner one assures that Allen, despite having changed, is still on their side. There's no reason to fear him. The other alien doesn't seem so confident. At the same time, Thaedus, Nolan, and Allen had been conversing. After hearing this news that only 50,000 Viltrumites remain, Thaedus begins to feel a bit bad. Nolan thought he would be happy. The matter is that Nolan doesn't know the truth about Thaedus. He is the leader of the coalition and swore to destroy the Empire. He's also a Viltrumite. Nolan doesn't believe it and asks him to do the beard pull. Thaedus has no problem doing it, but he already did it previously. Allen confirms it. He pulled his beard and only the mustache remained. This new information makes Nolan emotional. He always thought there was something wrong with him. All the Viltrumites had always been loyal. He thought he was the first to rebel. Thaedus explains that his betrayal was a secret, removed from the historical records, but now there's no time to talk about that. Nolan, Thaedus, and Allen must be quick, because Thaedus still thinks Allen is betraying them. For this, all the information Allen gathers should go directly to a private database, and both Nolan and Allen must go in search of these weapons and beings that can hurt Viltrumites. Because if they can get them on their side, the coalition of planets will win the battle. And so, both Allen and Nolan prepare for the adventure. The coalition provides them new suits, and although Allen likes the cape, Nolan thinks Allen has too many pockets and thinks maybe that will get in Allen's way. Nolan and Allen decide on a first objective. Allen is very close. Nolan wants to take it as a warm-up. On the way, Allen begins to taste his favorite food, what Nolan had never heard of, but seeing that it's creatures similar to worms, when Allen asks if he wants some, Nolan just says no. Sometime later, they arrive at their objective, the Balone Belt. 100 years have passed since Nolan was here, and it looks exactly the same. Allen asks Nolan to give him the information about his book. Within the words and paragraphs, he has hidden several numbers. These numbers are the coordinates of the specific asteroid they're looking for, and after doing some calculations, Nolan finally finds the sought-after asteroid. Allen asks how he can be so sure if all the rocks look the same. Nolan responds he's not sure, but it seems familiar to him. Finally, once they enter a cave, Omni-Man finds what they were looking for, a weapon. This weapon belongs to Space Racer, a character unknown to Allen. The Space Racer weapon fires indestructible blasts that pierce through anything, and this weapon can only be fired by him, since the weapon and he share a bond. If anyone else uses this weapon, the weapon would have destroyed the pile of marble that Nolan dropped on Space Racer and freed him. That's why the Viltrumite had no choice but to leave it here, lying on the ground. But now, after 100 years, most likely Space Racer is dead, so there's no problem anymore. Nolan touches the weapon and it starts to fly and heads towards its master. Nolan deduces that maybe the weapon is going towards Space Racer's corpse, and both individuals start to dig, until suddenly Nolan asks Allen not to move, because despite the fact 100 years have passed, Space Racer is right in front of Nolan. He still remembers him and asks for a reason not to kill him this instant. Once and for all, danger lurks. Nolan and Allen in space, the king points his weapon at them, but the last time Nolan faced him, he couldn't defeat him, so this time there'll be no difference. Both Nolan and Allen attack Space Racer to prevent him from continuing to shoot. However, a shot leaves the pistol, and soon the entire asteroid begins to collapse. Allen warns Omni-Man that soon there'll be a chain reaction, and this won't be good at all. The asteroid collapses. Fortunately, both Allen and Nolan quickly get out of there. Nolan and Allen continue moving away from the place to avoid the debris, but they hadn't taken something into consideration. Now that they're in deep space, the Space Racer has the advantage. A vehicle impacts against Nolan at full speed, freeing the king. The gunslinger points at Nolan, but the Viltrumite asks him to please listen. There's something he wants to talk about. Nolan tries to explain that they haven't come to fight, they've come to free him. However, Space Racer is a bit more intelligent. He deduces that they've come hoping he would be dead to take his weapon. Allen confirms this fact, and given that Space Racer holds anger toward Nolan, the member of the coalition intervenes. He agrees with the king. Sometimes Nolan is a jerk, and the truth is, they did come for the weapon. They thought he had died a long time ago, but now, after many years, Nolan has completely reformed and is helping the coalition to fight against the Viltrumites. Nolan confirms everything that Allen is saying. He has rebelled against the Empire and apologizes to the king. He doesn't want his past actions to put him against the coalition, because the coalition may be the universe's best hope in the war against Viltrumites. Allen asks the king to accompany them to the coalition. There, he'll be able to confirm they're fighting against the Viltrumites. Added to this, he promises to give him anything he asks for. Space Racer comments he's been under those rubble for 100 years and asks Allen if he has anything to eat. Fortunately, Allen still has some cans, but seeing those worms floating in space, the racer passes. He takes his trusty motorcycle and accepts to accompany Nolan and Allen to the coalition, but the entire way he won't stop pointing his weapon at them. If they betray him, he'll kill them. Nolan and Allen head back to the coalition, and even though they have a weapon pointing at them, they're happy with what they've achieved. Back on Telescria, the king is being examined by the planet's best doctors. His metabolism is astonishing. Thaddius thinks he'll be of great help against Viltrumites. Allen comments he'll return home while waiting for the next mission. Thaddius had promised to give him 2 days off. The coalition leader promises to notify them. Nolan asks where he should go, but Allen intervenes and invites him to his house to stay and sleep, something he'd soon regret, because staying at this house, he'd have to endure what Allen and his girlfriend do every night. And even though Allen asks him if everything's fine, out of modesty, Nolan assures there's no problem. Some days later, Allen and Nolan leave on a mission again. This time, they've come to the planet of the Ragnars, perverse creatures, extremely dangerous and indestructible. The only solution Nolan found to prevent these creatures from continuing to evolve is to cover their sun and freeze the planet. Allen asks how they'll be able to find the creatures if they're all buried in ice. Omni-Man communicates with his spaceship and asks the captain please to take care of the disk by moving it. The captain doesn't quite understand the orders, and instead of moving it, simply shoots it, destroying it. Now, the sun hits the planet directly, and in a matter of minutes, all these dangerous creatures will be freed. Omni-Man and Allen hurry to take some, but along the way, the ice starts to crack, and one of the Ragnars is freed. On the spaceship, they start to detect that Nolan's cardiac signs have duplicated. Most likely, there are problems. The captain tries to communicate with Omni-Man and asks what's happening. Allen responds that what's happening is that they're idiots who ruined everything. Now, the ice is melting and they're surrounded. The mission now is impossible to complete. Allen will get Nolan out of here immediately, but Omni-Man asks him to please retreat. He can fight the creatures on his own. He doesn't want to endanger Allen. However, it's too late. The Ragnars are already on top of Allen. The alien tries to stop their jaws. Omni-Man frees himself and goes to help his friend. Nolan comments these creatures eat Viltrumite and are alive. The only reason Allen is enduring is because they're still recovering from the long sleep. With one blow to the Ragnar, freeing Allen, and asks him to retreat. The alien takes the opportunity and flies off the planet immediately. Nolan catches up with Allen. The alien asks Nolan to board the ship again, but Omni-Man is so furious that if he boards the ship, he'll destroy it. When the travelers return to base, they meet Thaddius. The leader thinks this hasn't been a total loss. At least they know the Ragnars are active. Maybe they can take some Viltrumites there so they'll kill them. But he still doesn't rule out the possibility of capturing some to train them. Thaddius asks Nolan to understand that they won't always succeed. He possesses the same weak Viltrumite blood and knows his species has a bad temper. The great control that Nolan has shown really surprises Thaddius. The leader apologizes because his people ruined the mission. Omni-Man asks him to not mention it, and he means it. Despite not having the Ragnars, Thaddius knows that in Nolan's books there are still more weapons, and tells both companions they still have a long way to go. The first stop is a planet where a plant called Klaxis grows. This plant is poisonous to Viltrumites. It can't kill them, but makes them vulnerable. The problem is that the plant grows without control, and to cultivate it well, they need scribe beetles. These creatures eat the plant naturally, and from the samples they excrete, the coalition will be able to obtain poison. On the planet Thraxa, the leader of this population told Omni-Man and Allen about the Kree. He knows one who might help them. During the Invincible War, we could see one of them floating in middle of space. Nolan remembers the migratory cycles of creatures called space sharks. They're very dangerous and will help them in battle. Not all their trips bear fruit. There are some creatures that have already died, but on one of the most peculiar planets, Nolan obtains information on how to find Thaddius. He's the prodigal son of this planet, the protector of this world. He gave them a utopia, but in doing so, became addicted to conflict. He's invulnerable and immortal. He left the world behind in search of adventures that dictate his unique abilities. And between adventure and adventure, Nolan keeps enduring living with Allen and his girlfriend. Allen's girlfriend wants Omni-Man to leave the house. Months have passed. He should have his own home. Allen promises to ask Omni-Man to move out next week, and after this, they return to the bedroom to keep making noise. Weeks later, when Omni-Man already has his own apartment, he's talking alone with Thaddius. Despite all the weapons they've been able to collect, despite all the new allies, Omni-Man still has doubts. He thinks it won't be enough. However, for some strange reason, Thaddius doesn't have the same doubts. He thinks it's time to attack. He orders Omni-Man to go to Earth in search of his son, and detects that anyone else who can help them. Thaddius promises to find more individuals who can fight against the Viltrumites, but there's something he has to reveal to Omni-Man. Thaddius wasn't very aware of the genocide of the Viltrumites. He turned his back on his race because he thought their actions were evil, and dedicated his life to putting an end to Viltrumite tyranny. He wants to end this era of violence and fear, but never knew the extent of the damage it would generate within his race. Behind this door is Thaddius' sin, the worst thing that has happened to the Viltrumites, and what made it possible was the coalition leader's genetic signature. The virus is Scourge, and now Thaddius has done it again, but this time it's an improved version. If the Viltrumites have developed immunity to the previous virus, this one will affect them anyway. Thaddius doesn't care if all Viltrumites become extinct. If he thinks the coalition's cause is lost, he won't think twice about releasing this plague. Very well, friends, this is how this chapter ends. Episode 2 features one of the most powerful beings in the universe, and let's just say even Viltrumites fear him. Comment next episode if you want episode 2, like and subscribe for more Invincible Season 4 breakdowns. See you in the next one.